So, okay, right. So I'll just give some context to what I'm going to show you and talk about. I graduated in '97 from Norwich University of the Arts, or what was Norwich Art School, with a BA in Visual Studies, and then I moved to London for a year, and then I moved back north to Leeds, where I live now. I actually went to school in Northumberland and spent quite a bit of time in Newcastle when I was a teenager and the northeast. But I live in, as I said, I do live in Leeds now. So I've been a practicing artist for over 25 years, and I make a living from my art. But I also have multiple funding streams, which on the mentoring course I did with Michael, actually, that was one of the things that we discussed, how to build up lots of different ways of earning an income to supplement your living and to enable you to continue to make your artwork. So between 2015 and 2018, I made a series of drawings and sculptures based on people in the emergency services in classical poses. So I call that project Transcending the Figure, and that project is the background to a current sculpture I'm making of a nurse called Emily from a critical care ward at St James's Hospital in Leeds. She started nursing in January 2020, so her whole year was taken up with COVID patients, and her matron said she was always to be found at the bedside of people throughout the pandemic. So she's great. She's a really lovely person to work with. I've been very fortunate to have met her. So Transcending the Figure. So this is I've got a short film of me talking about it, which I'll put on because it's sort of sums it up nicely. So hopefully you'll be able to hear it. Can you hear that? Did you hear that? Why wouldn't you hear that?
Hearing you, not the shared screen.
Yeah. Let me, all right. Okay, I will skip that then. That might be easier if I skip that and I'll just talk about it. Okay. And it won't bear relevance to other things, which has got sound on as well. Okay.
I think you can share.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, after you.
It looks like your volume at the right. I don't know your software, but I wonder if that's down. Oh no, it's not down at all.
It might be something to do with the fact that I've got these in, you see.
Yeah.
Let me just...
When you do share screen, you should have an option which says advanced, and then you go on add advanced sound, I think.
Okay.
So you'd have to come off share screen, then go back onto it.
I'll do that, yeah. Oh yeah, you're right. Share screen, share sound.
Ooh, excellent tech support.
Thank you. That works.
Yeah.
Emergency services where I've drawn and sculpted them in classical poses. I wanted to celebrate the public services and the front line of the public sector. The association with classical sculpture was one that I saw them as heroes, and I think a lot of people feel like that.
I've always enjoyed being a firefighter. It's been a great job, and I haven't really thought of myself as ever doing anything particularly heroic, but even just within a mile from here I rescued someone from a flat fire who was resuscitated successfully as well. So some people would say that was heroic, but I was just doing my job.
They would relay narratives from their everyday experiences. So for example, in the drawing Louise, she cradles a baby, and for that particular drawing that we chose from a selection of photographs, Louise went through the scenario of rescuing the child from a road traffic accident, checking that the child was okay, and then handing the child over to a paramedic.
I think in the end you went for a stance where I was stood in a kind of contemplative pose, and a couple of others where I kind of had my hands in my body armour. And we tend to, you'll see police officers will kind of tuck their hands into their body armour, and the reason they do that, you kind of need your hands to be out of your pockets, available. When you're talking to members of the public, a lot of the time you're dealing with unknown elements, and you might be stopping somebody to talk to them, and maybe quite hostile, that might be wanted, and you don't know how that interaction is going to go, so you need to be in a semi-ready stance to respond to anything that they may do.
A hydraulic cutting tool for taking apart cars after car crashes. So they're kind of a vital part of a modern firefighter's armoury now, and something that's used very, very often in road traffic collisions where people are trapped in cars.
I was able to cast 3 of the 4 sculptures. These included learning how to create out of clay a figure, which I've never done before, which was a very exciting process. Once I'd made the clay sculptures, I was able to take those into York College, and we used silicone mould, which was then cast in casting plaster. The working with the schools was a process where I'd go into each school and with the children over a series of time make some small hand figures, which is also part of the exhibition.
From the police perspective and from my perspective, the whole thing was about engagement with the project and wanting to portray the police in a positive light.
Anything that highlights the work of the emergency services to the general public is a fantastic thing.
There you go. So,
this is a 3-year project.
Oh, sorry.
This is a 3-year.
So there you go. So when I'm working in the studio, I've just got a few things that I like, and I could argue is research that I use in my artwork. So I'm very interested in this neuroscientist called David Eagleman. What if I told you that the world around you, with its rich colours, textures, sounds and scents, is an illusion, a show put on for you by your brain? If you could perceive reality as it is, you'd be shocked by its colourless, odourless, tasteless silence. Outside your brain, there is just energy and matter. So I'm very, I find that quite sobering, but quite enjoy it as well. And I'm really getting into this Instagram artist, so I just wanted to put her work on. Jerry Gagosian, I think she's really witty. So this is, she does these sort of collages and memes, which I really like. The art world expressing gratitude to Instagram for making it relevant again today, which was because Instagram and Facebook went down yesterday, which was a lovely break for everyone, I think, needed break. So yeah, and you got Mark Zuckerberg there with the Pope, which I think is really witty. And this is another one that I really liked. If a man tells you he can help you with your art career, run. So that was quite good as well. When I'm making my work, I listen to mainly acid house, house, and rave, which is my kind of era. I loved the 90s. The 90s to me is what the 60s were to my parents. So I have fond memories of the 90s. So this is the sort of music that I like. So I'm hoping you'll all just dance around your living room and kitchen when you hear it.
We've got Stafford's homies, Bizarre Inc., and they're playing with knives.
Just dance and move your body. Gotta get up, just dance and move your body.
There you go. With Normski there, any of you remember? It's hard to think that that's actually about 30 years old now. So, yeah. Okay, so these are the drawings that I made. So here you've got the one of Louise with cradling baby. This is a Bridlington RNLI, and this is the West Yorkshire Mounted Police final drawing. These measure 1.50 m by 1.20 m, and I use graphite on paper. And I used a style used by George Surratt in his drawings, where you layer the graphite and then you apply a layer of fixative over the top, and then you apply another layer of graphite over, so you can really get quite a dense tone in there. And I use a 9B, a sort of 6B, 7B, 8B, 9B soft graphite pencil and stick. So yeah, those are them. And then this, at the end of the project, I had 4 exhibitions. One was in Norwich, one was in Sheffield, one was in York College because they'd support the project, and another one which I had actually had quite recently over the summer was in North Lincolnshire at the Rope Walk Gallery, which is a lovely space if you ever get a chance and you're over that way. So just at near the Humber Bridge there on the Lincolnshire side. So these are the photos from the East Gallery. The East Gallery is in Norwich, which is where I did my degree. So it was partly an Illumini show for them as well, and for myself. We made, I'm trying to get the numbers, I think we're looking at around 700 of those figures. It doesn't look that many, does it, when you look? But I think it was something around that figure. And I worked with schools in Norwich and Leeds and Sheffield as well. And they made these very small clay sculptures where the kids would make a cuboid and 2 cylinders and a sphere. Then we would score and slip them together, and then they could sort of make them into their own heroes. So obviously they were doing Spider-Man and Captain Marvel and that sort of thing, which is fine, you know, it's great. So yeah, and I'd show them my work, and then we'd talk about classical sculpture as well. So really lovely gallery space. So I was very lucky to have it, really. These are the 2 smaller sculptures that I made. This is the East Anglia Air Ambulance man that I worked with. and this is the firefighter here. And this is kind of hit home a bit, because when I was installing this, a man came into the gallery, sort of, I wouldn't say stormed in, but his presence was felt. He was very emotive, and he'd been a soldier in Afghanistan and had dealt with a dying baby. I won't give you the full details, and he could really identify with this sculpture. So it was a really powerful moment. Actually, it's quite upsetting to talk to him, and he was quite upset himself. Yeah. Okay. So the sculpture idea sort of evolved. I was actually looking to it with the police. Ironically, the police have been, I don't know why ironically, but the police have been the most positive and receptive to collaborating with me than the other services. In many ways, the most difficult was actually the Coast Guard, and it's all to do with their infrastructures and hierarchies. So the Coast Guard in the UK structure goes directly to the Home Office, whereas the other three emergency services have their own internal hierarchy and infrastructure, with, you know, like the West Yorkshire Chief Commissioner and so on and so forth. But the Coast Guard just doesn't have that. So it was very difficult negotiating with them. And eventually I worked with them in Bridlington, and they were brilliant, you know, but it took a lot of negotiation to get there. And then the police have been really black and white about the whole thing, would say yes and no to various things. The only thing that they didn't want was any negative portrayal of them. I think the irony is that if you just Google police, you get loads of negative images from them. So my whole thing was to collaborate and to work with, which involved me basically agreeing with them. I'm not going against them. So one of the poses, I don't know if you can see, that initially the police officer did was a training pose where he'd hold a baton like that, and he'd go stop, and the baton would be raised, and it looked like a Grecian warrior sculpture. It just looked brilliant, but we couldn't use that. So the Chief Commissioner for the West Yorkshire Police found out about it and said, you can't use that, you can't do that. So we went for less aggressive poses, and the most, well, not aggressive, but the most controversial was in one of the drawings. The police officer had his handcuffs out, ready to put them on somebody, and they would, when they do that, they're taught to hide them, because if people see it, that will antagonize them. So you could just see him hiding the handcuffs. So that's, yeah. Anyway, so the police have been really receptive to it, and I was talking to them about the possibility of making a sculpture of a woman police officer, and then COVID hit, and they just shut down conversation with me. They sent their apologies, but they said they were just not in a position to do anything now, and so it was sort of on the back burner really. And then I got into doing painting and drawing over the lockdown, and I was just going out and just drawing and painting what I saw around where I live, and doing that sort of thing. And then I started this course. Michael and I were on with Cheryl Garrett. Cheryl Garrett was the editor of the Face magazine in the 80s and the 90s, and she runs coaching courses for creatives now. And as it evolved, as that progressed, the idea of me just creating a sculpture of a nurse just sort of also manifested itself, and it was sort of supported within the group as well. So it all kind of seemed to be coming together. And it all sort of fell into place. So the series of images now of the sculpture, since I've been able to make it. I have a GoFundMe page which is helping fund it, as well as me putting in my own time to do it. So this is the sort of strap line that I've been using. Exciting new public sculpture will recognise a significant contribution made by nurses during the pandemic. So this is the Noddy School of Sculpture here, which is where I come from. I've not really got any sort of formal sculptural training, really. It's a sort of new thing for me to be working in this way, and the whole thing is kind of quite tacit. So I get advice from people who I've got a lot more experience. So obviously I'm building the armature here, and I'm calling in favours to help make the metal frame. So a friend I know who's got a business was able to make the metal frame. The GoFundMe page helped pay for some material costs, so I could start to build it up. And here I have a, why won't you go away? Oh, there you go. Me working on the sculpture in a, what's it called? Time altered way. So for the sculpture, I wanted it to be of a nurse looking into the distance, which is a classical sculptural pose. So in the Greek sculpture, the heroes look off to the side, look off to the right. So my understanding is that they're not looking at, they're reverting their eyes from temptation, which is ahead of them. So I did that with Emily's pose. I worked with a photographer called Jonathan Turner, who's a Leeds-based photographer, and he took a lot of images for me of Emily, and I've been working from them. So yeah, I've gradually just been building the sculpture up, applying clay, moulding it, and working from the images that I have. So this one is a slow-mo around the sculpture. Yeah, it's just, I'm going on YouTube all the time, just getting tutorials up of how to make sculpture, and they're really useful. And I wanted it to, I didn't want it to be a sort of idealized sculpture. I wanted, don't close the door because the Wi-Fi will go off. Sorry, my kids are closing the door. So I wanted it to be, with the mask, I wanted it to just sort of be exactly how she was at work. So she came into the studio and she wore all of a full PPE. The only problem I have is that the visor, I can't sculpt a visor. So I'm going to just leave it with nothing. And so you've just got her eyes out, basically. And I think that was it. Yeah. So this is the last one. This is from today. So I was working on the hands today. I've still got a bit of work to go there, but gradually. So the idea of this is, so I haven't just done it without any support. I've got the support of Leeds City Council, and I'm talking tomorrow to their arts officer about siting it in the city centre. I've got a few places I'd love to see it. In the city square in the centre of Leeds, there's an area with a lot of male Victorian sculptures, and the only female sculptures there are naked women holding up lamps. So I'd really love to contrast that with my work of a working woman who's been working on the front line. And is in full uniform, so I'm really keen to do that. What's from doing the course with Cheryl and that Michael now Ron, what she's emphasised, and I do agree with this, is that it's not about me, it's about Emily, and it's about the nurse. So they're going to be making a film of Emily, talking about her experiences, and we're going to use that as a promotional tool for the project. As well. So yeah, so that's where I am. I have had quite a lot of support from within the city. So I'm trying to make it all about Leeds as well. I'm trying to make it, get the people of Leeds and West Yorkshire behind the work, really, because I think it's about the city, and it needs to have that kind of level of support. So I've been on the local radio and things like that, promoting it as well. It's going well. I mean, Hilary Benn MP, who's like a nationally known politician in the UK, and from Leeds, he supported it. So generally, it's been a very positive reception, actually. So yeah, it's doing it softly, and I am doing it around other work as well. It's become a bit more of a passion, and I do keep referencing Tony Hancock's The Rebel and all of that, sort of, you know, making a sculpture, and it becomes a kind of like, ooh, a thing, you know, quite a thing. But I am enjoying that process as well. So yeah, that's it. Is that 25 minutes, Hollis?
Sorry, I don't pay attention to time, because I'm just like, you take as much time as you want or need, really. But
okay.
So yeah, because we're on 22. So yeah. I mean, if you've got other stuff that you want to share, by all means, or we can go into Q&A. It's up to you.
Well, I think that's cool, really, just to sort of show you that. I mean,
yeah.
I've got a website, pauldigby.co.uk, so I've got other projects on there. So I am in a good position. I do have other things, art things, you know, but I mean, the past year has been like, for everybody, it's just been a real killer, you know. Professionally, I've just been stumped. And I came out of it with all the things that I had in place before the pandemic have just completely gone now. And that's been a real eye-opener. I've had little support from any governmental aid as well. So I've fallen through the net, really. So I have been mainly on sales and commissions over the past year, and on a bit of online teaching as well. So it's been a really difficult year, and I feel like I'm coming out of it, but it's slow, I have to say. But yeah, and I'm just sort of putting my head down to the ground, and I'm just enjoying making this sculpture now. I just want to focus on that as much as possible, really. So so that's where I am. There's a GoFundMe page there. If you don't, it'd be great if you want to donate. I much appreciate it. But or if you want to share it, that's as valuable in many ways. So
absolutely. Would you send me that link, and I can put it on
definitely
the video blurb as well? Yeah, like as a clickable link rather than in the video. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does anybody have any immediate questions? I've got a few things, but does anybody have any kind of burning questions? So I've got three things that I wanted to mention. First of all, I was wondering, with your the schools workshop, you know, with the smaller size models, the sculptures that you did with the kids, I was wondering if it was like a direct comment or homage to Field, you know, Anthony Gormley's Field.
Yeah,
that's like a bit of a riff of his work.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a fraction of what he's done. I referenced that without a doubt. Yeah, but it was. Yeah, I mean, now I presented it was in a spiral. So I mean, in no way, because Gormley's thing's ongoing, isn't it? It's still being made now. Still, people still contribute to it now. So, and I'm not pretending I'm in that kind of league at all. But I just reference that piece of work because it is fantastic. I mean, it's a great piece of artwork. But I mean, there's thousands of them. There's like 50,000 of them or something like that, isn't there? And more. It's like, I was like a few hundred. So yeah.
Would you like yours to be like an ongoing piece as well? Like
no, not at all. In fact, I don't have them anymore. Some of them went back, and then loads of students were taking them at the last exhibition. So I have a handful of them left. So it was, when it was over for me. I mean, storage is an issue. I'm not in a position to be able to store hundreds of small sculptures. I'm just not in that position. So yeah, I didn't do. So yeah.
Thank you. Marianne says, I have questions, but my connection is a bit dodgy, so I'll ask on here. Okay, so how did, I don't know if you can read it yourself, Paul, but how did you approach the key workers in terms of getting them involved? How did you choose whose stories you wanted to capture? Really good question.
So the stories came, they just evolved from the people I worked with, and every one of them was pretty harrowing. So, you know, there was no selection process at all, because every time you'd talk, you just would come out, you know, with one paramedic, I went in with a photographer, and we had young kids at the time, and he was talking about a dying child, and we were just in tears. We were just like, we couldn't, you know, and you just don't, you just realize that you're not, you know, your life's quite fortunate, and you're not dealing with this horrible stuff that they deal with all the time, you know, and it is quite harrowing. And what was the other question? So, yeah, so approaching. So the first way, I knew one of the policemen, so that was the first way. I just asked him. Well, I knew his brother better, and I asked him, and that was how that sort of worked out. And then he put me in touch with another policeman, and then they got me in touch with the West Yorkshire Mounted Police, and yeah, so it was going well. So I would work with quite a high up officer, and everything had to go to the chief superintendent as well for them to agree on it. So that was quite straightforward, as I said, because just because of how the police are, you know, it's like right or wrong, and it just felt like that. As the paramedics, I approached them, and then I approached them, and then I approached them, and then I approached them, and it's just ongoing. It really was. Paul, the firefighter you saw, he's actually his wife worked with my mum, and that's how I got him involved. And he's quite. I mean, the people that I'm working with are up for it as well. So they're the good bodies that you find in the emergency services that are up for doing stuff like that. I mean, you know, and then the other people were. It was harder work engaging with some of the other people. The paramedics. Well, the first paramedic I worked with, Richard, he was a former art student, so he was really keen to get involved. He really enjoyed it, you know. In fact, there's quite a few paramedics that were art students, actually, which is quite interesting. I found that quite fascinating. And then the RNLI, really straightforward, because they are a charity. They're not actually the emergency services, and they are funded by charitable donations. They don't actually have any money from government, and they don't want that either. They don't want the official status that say the Coast Guard has. And as I said, the Coast Guard were the most difficult, and I think it's to do with the fact that I was having to deal with PR and not with a manager or a senior manager who could just make a decision and that would be acted out. So I went to them initially. I finally got through to someone, and we went through it, and they said, yeah, okay, but you can't make money off the image of a person from the Coast Guard. I was like, well, you know, I might sell the work, you know. I mean, I said that might be, and they said, well, we can't have anything to do with that. And I was like, oh God, that's ridiculous, you know. So I said, well, who's your next person up? And they said it's a Home Secretary. I was like, oh God. I said, well, I'll write to them then. And then they had a little conversation, and they got back to me, and they said, oh, actually, no, it's fine. Go ahead and do it. It'd be okay. I think it was just slightly different sort of project. There was a lot of conditions that came with the police in particular. I couldn't portray them. The women police officers didn't want to be recognised, so I had to change their identities. And all of the police officers didn't want their first names used either. They just wanted to keep some anonymity and hide behind the job a bit, which is perfectly fine. You know, that was fine. We went to the fire stations, and we invited people into the studio we went to one fire station in West Yorkshire, possibly over Halifax way actually, and they went out and they left us in the fire station, so me and the photographer there, and they went out because they you know, unbelievably, they have a job to do, and they went out because there was a fire somewhere and they had to go out and do that. So yeah, and me and my friend were just sat there like in the fire station. We thought it was hilarious, just the two of us. They'd all cleared off, you know. So yeah, generally, I mean, everybody was really receptive. It was a really positive project. I've sold some of the work, some of the drawings, and then I got a commission to do 2 drawings of a nurse. Sorry, I haven't put those on. I could have put those on for you. And then it's just evolved with working with Emily, really, and just I think it just seemed like a natural progression. I was a bit concerned that people would see it as me sort of cashing in on a very horrible period, but I just felt it was connected to what I was doing. You know, it wasn't distant from what I was doing, so it felt all right to do that. And because it's about Emily, and because it's going to be more and more about Emily, I feel happier as well. So it's less about me and my status as an artist, you know, which you kind of, you as an artist, you're always going up against your own ego. That's half the battle, I think, most of the time. And it's easier if you can remove that from the whole process, in fact. And it just enables you to continue making work, I think, if you can just let that go. So yeah, so in a way, it's a welcome thing just to focus on Emily and just to make it all about her. I mean, she's 21, you know, and she's, I just keep saying this, 21, you start your job in January. Oh yeah, critical care ward, it's pretty serious. We're going to see a lot of horrible things. And then 3 months later, you've got you're in a pandemic. It's just incredible what she's had to go through for the first year of her nursing. I just, yeah. And she's pretty, she seems quite, when I speak to her, I'm seeing her next week, she's coming to, we're going to interview her next week. She's pretty resilient character. Well, I mean, you have to be, I think, to go into nursing, don't you? And going on to a critical care ward. But I think this has aged her, I think, quite dramatically, quite quickly. So yeah.
Can I ask a question? It's just like, it's maybe a very boring question about materials, but like you were saying about the place that I recognise very well in Leeds, the one with like the nubile sort of like definitely topless, kind of like Victorian or whatever Edwardian sort of visions of womanhood holding up lamps and all the bearded patriarchs and the nice frock coats and suits and stuff. If you were to succeed in getting it there, that'd be brilliant. I mean, that would be really, there's a lot of history of that place. It's where the occupied tents were. It's where the winos hang out. It's where all kinds of things happen. Station and stuff. But like, if you were to get it there, what are your materials? Is it something that'd be half as robust as something that needs the late night, Leeds nightlife?
Yeah, it's going
to go past, because like not much survives the cleaning machines, does it?
Jasmonite. That's the material I'm looking to use. I'm going to use a pigmented external jasmonite. I wanted it to be, I've talked about using bronze, and there's a Leeds artist called Pippa Hale who's just got she's creating a piece, a sculptural piece, and she's using bronze. The reason for jasmonite is it's a contemporary material, but also it's got its environmental footprint is the lowest for an external material that I could come up with. And that a friend of mine called Steve Perkin, who works for a company down south that uses fiberglass predominantly. He put me in contact with this material. He told me about this material, and then there's another artist I know from I've met subsequently from Norwich who's called Nick Dutton, and he made a really large scale Alan Partridge years ago, which is really good. But he uses jasmonite as well. And then there's a showing at Leeds Art Gallery at the moment, James, I can't remember his surname, but he's been using jasmonite. So it's a very robust material, and it's got a lovely finish as well. I mean, I would love it to go on a plinth. as well. What I would love, and I'm going to suggest it, but I know it will happen, is they remove one of their bronzes and replace it. I'm going to start at that, and then we'll work backwards. So
just to get my head around the process. So what you make in the minute will be the mold that you will then kind of get a hollow ultimate.
Yeah. So the sculpture. Then we make a 2-part mold, and then we'll fill that mold with jesmonite. Whether I do it or involved with that process or not, I don't know yet. I think if I can get the funding together enough, if I can fundraise enough, it will be a company or someone who's got a little bit more knowledge, and they'll do it. I want to get involved with it when they're doing it, but I'll probably leave it to their expertise. So, and then the actual finish, I want to be quite sort of smooth as well, and artificial looking too. I don't want it to look like a bronze too much, but it will be black or a really dark grey. So it'll be, because jesmonite itself is a white finish, or a very light colour finish. But this I want it to be really dark. So So it'd be jesmonite, and I think it'll be on a plinth. I'll have to wait to see. I'm talking to Sarah Priestley tomorrow, and Sarah's very she's very up on women's rights in Leeds as well. She's been on the TV recently talking about sort of reclaiming the street thing after the horrible thing of Sarah Everard and that young that other Asian woman, I can't remember her name now, but so she's been on the TV about talking about that. So it's just I think she'll be excited by it, and I think she'll support me. But whether or not we could get it in Leeds City Square is another thing. But I thought I'd just start there anyway, just see what they say. Yeah, I mean, because Leeds did a research on their sculptures and found that there was only one which had a dubious sort of racist connotations, which is on the exterior of a building of an old bank. So yeah, and I knew of that because I've been on a tour by a black artist called Harold of Fear, and he pointed it out, that sculpture. So yeah, so actually Lisa's come out of it not too bad. What would you say to someone just starting out with sculpture? I don't.
Sorry, my connection is like cutting in and out, so that's why I'm asking on the chat.
Yeah, I do a lot of painting and drawing, and I love making sculpture, but I think drawing's really where I start, and I just sort of draw out ideas in sketchbooks, and then I just sort of work up from there really. So I always wanted to be a painter, and then I look at like sculptures like, Henry Moore and people like that. I think, oh, I really want to do that, but I never seem to feel like I fit that mold, and I just rely on drawing really, and if I get the opportunity, I go into sort of doing sculptures or doing paintings. But yeah, I've got a lot of colleagues, friends who are painters, really serious painters, and they have like serious painter shows together and stuff, and it's lovely, but I just don't really feel like I fit that mold. But I mean, it's the same thing with people who are sculptors. I don't know if I necessarily fit that mold either. So I just draw as much as I can because I just find it just such a much more instant response, and then if I'm able to take it further, I will do. So yeah, so just keep working, isn't it? It's just all that I said. I don't know. Just keep doing what you can. Just keep working and making. Really, just keep pushing it forward, progressing it. Yeah. I'm in Newcastle later this month.
I wanted to try sculpture. Oh, sorry, it's my connection's quite bad.
I'm at the Baltic later this month doing a kids workshop.
I'll put my camera off and see if that helps.
All right, she can, yeah.
Can you hear me all right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to say, no, I find sculpture really interesting, and I wanted to try it for a while, but it's a case of kind of just delving into it and not worrying about what other people think. Because that I don't know, I found that when I was doing my masters, then you kind of want to share it with other people, say on like the fine art course, and you don't come from that background, and they kind of, I don't know, kind of turn their nose up a little bit because they're like, oh, you don't have that kind of background in this, why you try it? I don't know. Say just keep doing your practice and try the drawing.
Marianne sort of
Trying to bring it out in sculpture. Gone.
Yeah. Is that just Marianne? Yeah. I always think at the back of art is good design, good ideas as well. And the drawing is just a kind of way of executing the ideas, really. So I don't know if there's, yeah. I didn't do fine art. I never did fine art as a degree. I didn't do it. I did visual studies at Norwich. And then I did fine art for my MA at Bretton Hall, which is not there anymore. So it's like I've never really felt that I fitted that kind of traditional art mold, really. So, and I've got more of a love of buying vinyl and music, I think, which is sort of keeps me sane, really, because I think, yeah.
I feel like that also kind of has a sculptural element to it as well. Definitely has an aesthetic element to it.
What? Music?
The whole aesthetic of vinyl and the aesthetics around that.
Yeah. I think for me, it's having an object, a tangible thing. And that's why I love buying records. And that's why I love sort of holding stuff. You know, I kind of like having a sort of a thing, an artifact, I think. And to leave something behind.
That makes sense. Cool.
Yeah, I'm at the Baltic doing a kids' workshop later in the month.
Oh, awesome. Oh,
yeah.
I haven't been there in a while because of COVID, but Baltic is great.
Yeah, it's great. It's a lovely space.
Oh, cool. No, it's fab. And it feels very accessible as well, which is awesome.
Yeah. Other questions?
I think sometimes, sorry to interrupt you, Paul.
That's fine.
I was going to say, sometimes I think with art practice, we can have these like preconceived ideas and these overly conceptualized things, this notion of like a sculpture or drawing should look like this because this is what's come before us. Whereas you mentioned the children's workshop, and it just made me think that's probably the best sort of attitude to take, is like quite a childlike approach of almost trying to forget everything we know about sculpture and drawing and be like, well, what's fun about this? You know, like in a really childlike way of like, well, what is fun and exciting, and almost coming from it in like a naive way as possible. Like we don't know what clay does, and we don't know what clay looks like after an artist has worked with it. And like that testing of materials, like we've never seen it before. I think that can be quite a fun way of working.
So the workshop I do is it's based on New Order's True Faith video, and in it they've got people dressed in quite ridiculous outfits. So the kids make their own ridiculous outfits based on this video, and they use cardboard and coloured paper and that sort of thing. And a lot of it is about how they fasten it together and how. So one of the workshops where I did this session was there was two best friends, and they made a rucksack. One rucksack with two straps on either side of the rucksack. So they both were wearing the same rucksack facing the opposite way from each other. And they had like a little box at the top where they put their teddy bears, because they were quite young. and then sort of they would move backwards and forwards like that, you know. And so it's just about thinking with the materials and just purely tacit knowledge, you know, just learning from doing. And I think that's what kids do. But I think what we do as we get older is not quite the same as what kids do necessarily, because I mean theirs is all to do with their brain development, and our brains are, from what I've read, our brains are still engaged with plasticity, but in a slightly different way as adults, because we've got, you know, other responsibilities and other things to take into account. So, and also, I mean, you've got to make a living from this as well. So it's, you know, I have to see it as an object, I have to see it as a business, I have to do all of that sort of thing too. So it's very different to kids making in some ways, because they don't, you know, the framework, the infrastructure surrounding it is different. So yeah, I don't know if it makes it any better. I just think it's different. So yeah.
I had a question about when you mentioned that you couldn't sculpt the visor out of, was it clay you were working in for
Yeah.
I just wondered whether using a real visor would be possible or something you might be interested in.
Yeah, no, I thought of using different materials like perspex and glass, and I just think it would just get, I just don't think it's necessary. I just thought, nah, this is just, it's too much like hard work, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm trying to convey, it's an artwork, it's not a, you know, I'm just trying to convey something as well, a narrative with the object. So getting her to look over there, that's enough in itself, I think. So yeah.
It's what's interesting to me as a retired nurse is that they all wear scrubs now, don't they? So your statue of a nurse could be a female doctor, could be a healthcare assistant, you know, anybody really in PPE, basically.
That was the thing. It completely democratizes the person. There could be anybody, and the fact it's a nurse is important, but it was about celebrating the front line, and it was about showcasing people who have been, as far as I'm concerned, who have put themselves in harm's way in order to help us, you know. So a lot of our conversations revolved around anti-vax, you know, the annoyance that Jane and Emily have at the anti-vax campaign that went out. Jane in particular, the matron, how annoyed she was that someone had been into the hospital and photographed a deserted corridor, and they were saying, "Oh, look, there's loads of room," you know, and everything. But the fact is that what they've been doing is containing a very serious illness and doing it with such efficiency and with such dedication that's what I wanted to get across, really. And that's how. I mean, my mum's a nurse as well, and I think, you know, I do I do have a lot of personal personal connection, but it was just, it just seemed so important to me to convey that. And I kept seeing Jane, the matron, in the supermarket, and every time I saw her, she looked more and more frazzled, you know, just really taken out of it.
Can you say a bit more about your title, Transcending the Figure?
Yeah, so that was about them doing more than their job. So it was being more than the role that their job requires them to do. So they seem to put that little bit extra in, you know, and that's what I really, and the same with the nurses. It's like, it's a job, you get paid, you should get paid, but it was just, they seemed to be just that little bit more was required of them in order to do it. And I think it was the narratives that really reiterated that as well, that they would, you know, convey, particularly the one about rescuing children from road traffic accidents. That really hit home, and that sort of thing. So it was about how they transcended the figure, the physical, if you like, into a, not spiritual, but into a narrative, a collective unconscious narrative, if you like. You know, it was more along those lines that we could all tap into, we could all derive meaning from. And the looking to the future, it is really just that. It's just about looking to the future. It's a very simple, obvious, probably slightly cliched one, but it really was just about looking to the future and moving, progressing, and moving beyond now a little bit. So yeah.
That was connected to my other thing that I jotted down when you were talking, which is about, it's all about trauma really. And I think that what you were saying about transcending the figure and looking into the future, I think it relates to my own sort of research-based practice at the moment about trauma and collective trauma, you know, and these frontline people are very much dealing with that, but also dealing with their own personal trauma. And that where it kind of popped into my head is when you were talking about the person that came into the gallery and probably had a kind of a real kind of PTSD moment of seeing something that triggered him. I think you said him, but you know, triggered them.
It was him. He was a classic. I've worked in mental health, and he was a classic example of PTSD. I mean, I'm not there to diagnose, but I have worked with former soldiers who've had PTSD and they've not coped with it brilliantly. And he was coping, whether it was a positive way. He was doing mercenary work. He just couldn't stop, you know, being in a war zone, this man. And it's utterly frightening that happens, but that it does happen. He had family and he was in contact with them, but I won't tell you what happened, because it was awful. It was just horrible. So it was, but it obviously been a trigger. Seeing my sculpture had been a catalyst for that memory, and then he just had to tell the story to us, me and the curator, and we were both just about, like, you know, really upset for him, and just sort of said, "Are you all right going off back out into the world?" And he said he was fine, so we just left him to it. But
so I think my questions were sort of, or questions were around that kind of thing of, you know, there is this collective trauma, but there's also that sort of idea that potentially your work could be triggering for people, you know, who have come face to face with those kind of situations, but also for you as well. You know, you're hearing these stories that, you know, you could be experiencing secondary trauma of that kind of being relayed, the trauma of other people's lives and stuff. And I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that, about how you personally navigate it as an artist, and also how you can as a society. I don't know.
I think art, it's a twofold thing, isn't it, really, for me? Because I think, without a doubt, I'm upset by hearing people's stories. And then I just put that back into making the work. I think it's just my way of coping, you know, has been making, and it's all sort of tied in to it. Everything's connected, isn't it? You know, everything, all ideas become a manifestation of a physical thing, you know, and all thoughts and feelings pour into a piece of art, don't they? And so, I think, the more I listen, the more I have to make the work, and so on and so forth. So I'm just in the fortunate position to be able to do that, I think. I mean, I've had therapy in the past, and that's been great, but it's not a longer lasting way of working for me. I think making art is probably a more progressive way for me to, you know, to deal with these sort of issues. So, but it's not first hand as well. So I have like you say, secondary, I have a level of detachment from it as well. And plus I am quite keen on sort of experimental psychology and neuroscience, and sort of intellectualize the process a bit as well, just to cope with it, you know. So
good coping mechanism for sure.
Well, it is, you know, and I mean, Bruce Hood as well as David Eagleman are just excellent at dealing and coping with these, how the brain works and what is your brain doing at that time, and you can't escape it, but it's lovely to understand what is actually going on. And I think artists have done that as well for a long time, but it's, they're just, the neuroscientists now and the science now is just remarkable. It's just incredible what they're pulling out and conveying to us, And those two people in particular are really good at communicating to non-science people like myself. So, yeah.
Yeah, really good and accessible.
Yeah, and they make you feel like you're quite clever. But if I was sat in a meeting at one of their, I'd be like, what? I just wouldn't understand the word of it. But if I watch their TV program or read their book, I know what I mean.
There's a real skill in that, making something quite complicated, quite accessible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you done any work before about this neuroscience kind of academic side of stuff that you're quite interested in that's probably informing your practice? Have you actively done anything in terms of like presenting that, or in part communicating some of that stuff with your work, or do you keep that quite separate as almost like your personal research is that's that, and then
it's difficult because I'm very much of the mind of art for art's sake as well, because I'm an artist and my background's in art, and so I don't tend to link them directly, my interest in neuroscience and psychology, but I'm sure there is a connection, and somebody else might be able to see it a bit more clearly than me. Well, there's bound to be. It's just I don't literally reference them within my work, basically. And what I think is it probably manifests itself unconsciously on my part in my practice and what I do, but it isn't anything that I consciously I'm striving to do, and I don't want to be honest, because I think it might muddy the waters a bit too much. It's like doing when people do PhDs, they just I just fear that they just sort of start to lose themselves in the PhD and sort of cancel out making the work in a way, and they over conceptualize it, they over intellectualize it, and I don't think art in itself is it's not an intellectual pursuit. It's just not, it's just not like that. I sometimes feel, when you're just making, you just do it, and there's no reason for it in many ways. And yeah, anyway, I don't know what I'm talking about, really, do I? Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. I just think doing a PhD is probably really difficult. Actually, don't get me wrong. I do understand that, but I just sometimes I fear that it might have just stopping people from making art, as opposed to just helping them and encouraging them to make art. So
I think there's parallels there with a kind of therapeutic way of like you can intellectualize a complex emotional thought process and you can intellectualize it into a certain reductive way. So if you talk about artwork in a, like, you're making it intuitively, or it's encompassing all those kind of brain functions, so it's not just on a kind of like cognitive prefrontal cortex way. If that's only what we're doing with artwork in that very cognitive way, then we're missing out on the rest of the stuff. So maybe that's the parallel there in terms of like, PhDs, therapy.
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah, overthinking stuff.
Yeah, I think I turned 50 last weekend. So, and I think stuff comes with that. And I just feel I want to just make this sculpture. I just want to focus on doing that, and I don't really care about anything else in a way, because I just really enjoying doing that. I know I've got to make a living and I've got to do all that, so I've got funding applications in for this sculpture. I've got about 4 in. One's been knocked back from the Arts Council twice, which is really demeaning. And yeah, so, but I mean, ultimately it makes little difference now, because I'm going to push ahead with doing this anyway. Yeah, So
I think it's amazing that you would take on such a project, looking at YouTube videos, learning how to do it, and no training doing sculpture. I found that quite
I did do a lot
astonishing.
I did do a lot of 3D work, but it wasn't figurative sculpture. That was the thing. Like this, it was a working three-dimensionally. So I've always done that. I've always drawn, and I was really good at life drawing as a student, and I kept doing that. So by the end of my degree, I was the only person in the life drawing class. Nobody else was doing it anymore, and I actually got quite adept at it. So, and I do a lot of what I do is relatable to it. So I know about measurement. I know about. And it's the same principle. If I'm doing a life drawing, like I know where the shoulder is to the head to the foot, and so you're measuring up all that, and it's the same principle in sculpture. I know where the I mean, obviously then you move to another angle and you have to do it all over again. You move to another angle and you're doing it all over again. And I've got photographic images to work from as well. So I have got a lot of material resources in place in order to be able to do it, and a lot of experience in as I say, mainly in drawing, really. But I think it's all transferable skills, within the art genres. But when I have to say, when I first did it, I was like, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing. And it was so exciting. And it was so thrilling. Honestly, it was great. It was just what I needed, because I just not had that for such a long time. And I was telling my friend, and she's an artist, she said, yeah, that's great. That's really good, Paul, that's what it's all about, And it really was good. And I still feel a bit like that now. I mean, because I'm working on a large scale, I've not done this before. The fact it's going to be made into public sculpture as well, that's all very, very exciting as well, So yeah, so it was good fun, but yeah, it's frightening.
It is very exciting. Thanks so much for sharing. Has anybody got any other questions before we wrap up? I mean, we're not in any rush, but
it's not a question, but I was just going to comment on the like previous point about kind of like making, not over theorizing the art. So I've just done my final master's project on the embodiment of trauma, but trying to I don't know how to find the right words, trying to make that academic and theorize that was just difficult. And in the end, I kind of, not that I didn't, I tried to make a very kind of tactile work, but it was digital. It had to be digital because of the pandemic, which is the whole thing in itself. Yeah, in the end, I went for the very kind of somatic stuff and didn't make it academic enough. But I'm happy with how it came out. Just it wasn't as academic as it needed to be, but it's fine. But again, with the whole thing with PhDs, so my family are all trying to get me to do a PhD now, but I'm like, no, because I feel like I won't make the stuff I want to, and I won't perform, which is what I want to go into performance, like live art or music. So it's an interesting kind of like battle and trying to figure out what to do there. What's the right thing?
Is there such a thing as a practice-based PhD, Marianne?
There is this one in my department actually, but again, it's just trying to figure out if that will distract me from making the work or not. So just trying to weigh up the argument. But yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to be disparaging. Doing a PhD is probably a very good thing, professionally speaking, and you definitely get lecturing with it and stuff like that. So I think it probably, I just feel that sometimes, well, perhaps not just with a PhD, but there's a kind of over-intellectualizing art, which I can't do. And in fact, being outside of academia for me has actually been probably a better way of working for me. I don't know if I ever really got on with it being inside academia necessarily, but so in many ways, I think just being outside and just being able to not have to worry about that contextualizing in that way you know, and it isn't to say that my work doesn't have content or contextual or does not require contextualizing, because it obviously it does, but it's much more organic for me outside of academia. I guess you can do it inside of academia. I really, you know, I'm not saying that you can't. So yeah, don't be discouraged.
No, don't worry. Don't worry. I think I've also found, like, when I've done things outside of academia, I've like found I'm a very hands-on person. So it's just, if I did go back into that, finding a way to do that. Cool.
Maybe it's about finding the right, you know, the right tutor who has that sort of similar way of thinking and working and is sympathetic to those, you know, those needs, basically, because you're obviously going to have some academic requirements, but obviously getting what you want out of a PhD is going to be critical because you spend so long doing it.
Yeah.
You've got to get the best out of it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is to do with your supervisor and whether they're going to get the best out of you. So yeah, hunting for the right person, if you choose to go down that route, I think is really a good way of doing it.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Cool. Thank you.
I feel like we've covered so much in this talk. That's what I love about these sessions, is you kind of, you know, there's everybody's individual art practice is so rich. There's so many like elements to kind of talk about, isn't there?
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Paul. That was really inspiring.
Well, thank you for letting me come. It's been really lovely. Lovely to meet everyone. Thank you.